School Committee on October 11, 2023 at 7 p.m. I am Linda Lukowski, Chair of the School Committee. I want to welcome everyone here tonight. A reminder, this meeting is being audio and video recorded. Narissa Wallen was unable to be here in person, as well as Matt Landers, but they are both joining us remotely. All votes tonight will be held as a roll call vote. I'm going to read our vision statement. We are a community of learners known for our unwavering commitment to the meeting. I just have to make note that I had some dental things done today, so I'm not having a stroke or anything like that, so please bear with me. We are a community of learners known for our unwavering commitment to meeting the needs of all students through the adoption of best practices in our active partnership with families in the wider community who are united in supporting the development of engaged, successful, responsible, resilient learners. Students will be well prepared to be ethical, empathetic, and contributing citizens. Can we all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance, please? The next item is the Student of the Month. With the new school year, we get to welcome back one of our favorite agenda items. The Student of the Month program was established in 2019 by the school committee to honor exemplary students. Nominations are collected throughout the year from staff members at all 5 schools. Nominations are made through 5 categories: service to fellow students, teachers, or community; dedication, determination, and persistence in the face of obstacles; attitude towards learning and determination; high achievement in academics, athletics, or performing arts; significant improvement in academics, athletics, or performing arts. Selections are made by the chair of the school committee, the superintendent, and 1 member of the policy and advocacy subcommittee. The first student of the month is Michael Jaworski, and he was nominated by Melissa Goldner. Congratulations, Michael. Could you please both come up? And Mrs. Goldner, could you tell us why you nominated Michael?
Absolutely. But, all right. Roll call, huh?
Is the green light on? If it's red.
All right. So, thank you to the school committee. I am proud to introduce Michael Jaworski to you all tonight, this month's Triton Regional School Committee Student of the Month. When I met Michael last year, he struggled a little bit with his feelings about school and learning due to some extra challenges and obstacles that he has in his life, just like we all have, right? These feelings impacted his learning to the point where he and I spent a lot of time at the beginning of last year just working on building his confidence and his attitude towards school. That was sometimes felt by him and his peers, and so sometimes we struggle with friendships, but Michael is not the Michael that I see today, every day at Pine Grove, right? This year, Michael has worked so hard to build his academic skills in all content areas. He's excited to learn, even though he doesn't look it right now. While acknowledging that some things will always be difficult for him. He's reflective and often figures out how to alter his behavior or his attitude so that he can stay on a positive path even before a teacher intervenes. Michael advocates for himself and others in a way that I would not have thought possible just last year in this short time. As a result, he continues to make incredible strides, both academically and socially, even just in these first few weeks that we've been back to school this year. Every day, I am blown away by your persistence, your confidence, and your incredible kindness, even to our new friends in our classroom. He truly deserves to be acknowledged for his incredible efforts, and I just want to thank you all for choosing him to be your very first Student of the Month for this year. And Michael, we are so incredibly proud of you. Fist bump. Thanks, man. Thank you all.
Congratulations. Can we get a picture?
Sure.
You and all of everyone?
Yeah.
I think everyone.
Everybody.
Family. Oh, no, I'm taking a picture.
Yeah, you are. Come on.
Perrier, Miss Earl, got the whole crew.
Get in there, Mom. I'll go on the end.
You're fine.
Nice job, Michael.
The next item is the consent agenda. The consent agenda contains multiple donations tonight. Thank you to John Weston for his donation to the district of $5,000 to support the instrumental music programs at the 3 elementary schools, to the Institution for Savings for their donation of $2,500 for the high school robotics team, and to Subaru of America and their partner nonprofit Adopt a Classroom for their donation of $3,000 for classroom supplies at Salisbury Elementary School. The trip planning approval for the middle school students to visit Washington, D.C. is already included in the consent agenda. Can I have a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented?
I move.
Motion to approve the consent agenda.
I will second.
Any discussion?
There's a typo in the minutes in the section that talks about the motion for adjournment. Did I get that correct?
Okay. Thank you, Paul. And these votes will be roll call vote because both Matt and Narissa are remote. Paul Lees?
Yes.
Susanna? Yes. Caitlin?
Yes.
Paul Goldner?
Yes.
Paul Mayette?
Yes.
Matt Landers?
Yes.
Narissa?
Yes.
I'm a yes as well.
Can I just add one clarification? So you noticed a donation from John Weston for $5,000. There was a previous $10,000 donation, which is what made the elementary fourth grade instrumental program possible. So I just want to connect those dots in case some of you saw the other higher amount.
New business, would any members like to raise additional items for inclusion on a future agenda? Seeing none. The I didn't see him. No, I didn't see him, yeah. The Wellness Coordinator Report Wellness Policy Approval. With the committee's permission, I would like to take two items on the agenda together now to be respectful of our presenters' time. First, the proposed update to the Wellness Policy and Director of Curriculum, Instruction and Assessment, Dr. Anna Bates, Wellness Coordinator Matt Jackling, and Food Service Director Sarah Lippman, and then Dr. Bates and Matt Jackling will stay for the second item, the Wellness Coordinator Report. Is that okay with the committee? Great, thank you, and welcome to our presenters.
There's, Madam Chair, we skipped over a question of it about the public comment, and I think a number of our audience has seen it.
I think you're correct, sorry. You are correct. Oral communication from the public. Members of the public may address the committee for up to 3 minutes, longer with the permission of the chairperson. The committee will not engage in a discussion on topics raised during public comment, but may choose to add the topic to a future agenda. This agenda segment will be limited to 15 minutes. Are there any members of the public who wish to address the committee? Mr. Cullen?
Statement.
I'm Bernie Cullen from Rowley. My understanding, based on the 1967 agreement among the 11 communities sending students to Whittier, is that the Triton School Committee appoints 3 members of the Whittier School Committee. Presumably, this committee is receiving details of the plans for the proposed Whittier project and has considered or is considering the implications of the $446 million Whittier building project for Triton and the ability of Rowley, Newbury, and Salisbury to support future capital projects for Triton. Last week in the Ipswich Local News, there was a report by Trevor Meek on the presentation of the Whittier Superintendent Lynch regarding the projected costs of the new Whittier building project for Ipswich. The article prompted me to look at the video of that meeting. The video showed that a number of the members of the Ipswich Select Board, Finance Board, and School Committee were concerned, I would actually say stunned, at the $23 million cost to Ipswich. With financing at 4%, according to my calculations, that cost would climb to nearly $40 million over the 30-year period. Members of the 3 Ipswich boards realized that under the 1967 agreement, Ipswich, which in fiscal year 2023 sent 2.4% of the Whittier enrollment, is on the hook for 7.8% of the capital cost. To say the least, this does not seem fair or reasonable. Something is seriously amiss with the Whittier agreement. Rowley currently sends 23 students to Whittier, or about 1.8% of the roughly 1,300 student body, but is on the hook for 3.7% of the capital costs, which amounts to $11 million before financing, and with 4% financing, $18.2 million over the 30 years. Newbury, with 1.3% of the Whittier enrollees, will be responsible for $9.9 million or $16.5 million after financing. The 1967 agreement, in my mind, is seriously flawed. The mechanisms for amending the Whittier agreement appear Byzantine and essentially untried in over 50 years. It just hasn't come up. It seems to me that it is in the Triton School Committee's best interest and all our interests to come to grips with what is happening and to do what it can to change both the magnitude of the Whittier project and the terms of the agreement covering the allocation of capital cost. Time is running out. The matter is scheduled for an election in January, which currently is heavily skewed in favor of Haverhill, which sends 68% of the students, but will be paying only 42% of the capital costs. If that strikes you as unfair, strikes me as unfair as well. Haverhill has no incentive to change the rules. Leaving this issue to a November school committee meeting may be too late. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cullen. No, you can.
I just want to clarify, not to comment on the opinions that Mr. Cullen represented, but the school committee's only purview in the Whittier arrangement is appointing the school committee members for each of the towns. All of the assessments go directly to the towns. The towns have the ability to approach, speak with, and work with the school committee representative on Whittier for their member town as the vehicle for the town to express their concerns about this arrangement. Obviously, you know, Mr. Cullen, from the discussions we've had about our own regional agreement, I don't see a regional agreement changing for Whittier quickly, but the school committee is the one, the Whittier School Committee, and there is a representative from each of our 3 towns, along with the other 8 communities. They are the ones that will vote in December to determine how the assessment is calculated. So the towns should absolutely, residents, town officials, otherwise, should be speaking directly with their school committee representative, their Whittier School Committee representative, because this committee, nor do I as the superintendent, have any authority. That's similar to the Triton Regional School District being an entity that provides educational services to Newbury, Raleigh, and Salisbury. We have our regional agreement with the 3 towns. It's a separate regional agreement that is not inclusive of any purview that our school committee has directly with each of the 11 member communities. So just to clarify that, that isn't something, lots of opinions around the table, and that's not the discussion here, but it isn't within the committee's purview to be able to make any changes.
Moving on to the wellness coordinator. Dr. Bates.
So are we doing the wellness coordinator report or the wellness presentation, of the wellness policy? Okay, great. So Sarah and Matt, if you guys can come up here if you'd like. So Sarah Littman has led, co-led with Kara Briley, most of the collaborative work that resulted in the proposed wellness policy. Oh, Sarah Littman, Food Services Coordinator. I apologize for that. So has led the collaborative work that has resulted in the policy that you have in front of you. So I'll turn it over to Sarah to share a little bit more about that.
Yeah. So last year, Kara and I, as co-chairs of the Wellness Committee, we actually were in a state program to help us update our wellness policy. So we had a state coach work with us on and updating our policy. We met several times throughout the year to do so, so that we can meet with the state guidelines, make sure we're in the WellSat assessment as well. And so we broke into subcommittees, updated our policy prior to coming to the school committee subcommittee in June. We had our wellness policy looked over by DESE representatives, the Department of Education representatives, as well as the John Stalker Institute, which is where our coach was through. Since the June meeting, there were 2 updates to the policy. We updated a section with the parties and celebrations to include food to be allowed in the classroom as long as it meets the competitive food guidelines and the USDA snack guidelines. And then the other update was to include universal school meals and CEP, which Salisbury Elementary is now a CEP school. And so that Food Services is offering our meals at the lowest possible cost through state and federal guidelines. So, yeah.
Does anybody have any questions? I just want to thank you again for all the work that you've done for the universal free meals.
Thank you.
All right.
I do have one question.
Yeah.
And I think it might be more for you. So and I love seeing this in there, that we should schedule meal periods at appropriate times with the ample amount of time given. I think it's questionable that any school meets that goal. Is that something we'd be actively working towards? I know that scheduling is nightmarish at best.
Yeah, so I would say we perpetually talk about that. With our time on learning, it's 900 hours required at the elementary level, secondary, which our middle school is designated secondary. It's 990 hours. We're very close to the 990 at the middle school and the high school. And by close, I mean very close. At the elementary, last I remember, it was over 1,000, so we have 100 hours to spare there. So is there any active effort to try and increase that? I would say there's perpetual discussions, but there is no path forward at this moment in time with between passing time and learning time requirements to give more time. Would love to, absolutely believe that. I don't think that anyone sitting at this table believes anything. We've talked about extra recess at the elementary level, right? We've talked about all these things that allow students to be healthy and well and engage in something other than focused learning during the day. So always an effort, but there is no foreseeable progress that I can see. I don't know if you, nothing, no genie in a bottle? Nope, Anna doesn't see a genie in a bottle either.
I mean, and I build schedules as well.
Yeah, you get it.
But does that put us immediately out of compliance with our new policy?
So the WellSat guidelines for meal periods is that we state that there is a reasonable amount of time set aside. There is no minimum minutes stated by the state. So all of the changes or anything in our policy currently meets all of the WellSat guidelines per regulations.
Great, thank you.
Free and reduced price meals. With the universal meals, I see there's still things in there about paid meals. Is that, do you get if a student wants a second lunch, do they get a reduced, is that why that's in there?
Yeah, so as part of the statement, I think it says about financial support of the department. So we do sell à la carte items, and we do offer second meals, and those meals are paid. So we offer one free breakfast, one free lunch, and then students have the capability of buying a second meal. They have à la carte items like water bottles or chips or snacks. And so that's why that statement is still in there, because we do, students do have the ability to purchase items in addition to the free meals through that program.
You remember, I think it was the same time we were almost sure universal meals were happening in June, that you increased the lunch price to meet the, what's the standard called?
The DESE guidelines, yeah, they,
Another acronym for it,
oh God, all the acronyms.
the DESE guidelines.
Yeah, DESE tells me what to do. There is a minimum set price that they said because of the food cost and whatnot. So when we are selling our second meals, there is a minimum price, and that's why we increased our meal prices to adhere to that.
But that, again, is the second meal, the first meal.
Right.
First breakfast, and second chance breakfast, all free.
Anybody else have any questions? All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
You have to approve that.
I move we approve the updated wellness policy as presented.
I second the motion.
We have to do this by roll call vote. Any discussion? Paul Lees?
Yes.
Susanna? Caitlin? Paul Goldner?
Yes.
Paul Mayette?
Yes.
Matt?
Yes.
Narissa?
Yes.
I'm a yes as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sarah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for all you do.
Thank you for all your support. Just hop in. Great.
Okay. So thank you. And I want to introduce Matt Jackling, the Wellness Coordinator. He's certainly hit the ground running and has done a lot of work to continue and maintain some of the things that have been established in the last couple of years, but also brings a wealth of knowledge and experience and some creative ideas for programming to help move us forward. So I'm excited to introduce him to you this evening.
All right, thank you. First of all, great to meet everyone. Sit down and have some time to kind of go over kind of what the entry plan is for this position. Before we get going, I just want to thank Anna and Brian for helping me get integrated into the system. It's always challenging coming in to a different district, especially one that's to a position where you really have to figure out the stakeholders and get the ideas of what admin really wants to do moving forward regarding something like wellness, because it's so far-reaching. So it's been really a really good learning experience for me to get to know the people in Triton and to figure out how the school community wants to move forward. So I believe everyone has a copy. Yes? Awesome. So I just put together some short-term and long-term goals that I'm really focused on as we come in here. There's a lot of change in health and PE in the curricular aspect of this position over the last year because of the new state standards for health and PE. So part of this position is going to be kind of doing a needs assessment based on what are we offering our students K through 12. I have a background predominantly as a health teacher, so coming through that lens and kind of seeing how this shows up in our classrooms and what are we educating our students on during this time is really one of my first priorities and probably where I feel the most at my depth. So obviously looking at current programming and trying to figure out what is our district approach to wellness that coincides with this new with all these new state standards. So we've been really kind of working through that process to start. Those standards, as you know, were approved at the very end, early fall. And so a lot of the state is kind of playing catch up. We've had some time to kind of look at those standards beforehand and comment on them, but now that they've been approved, we're looking at how this is going to begin to show up within our classrooms. Now, how it shows up in the immediate, what are we doing for our current K through 12 curriculum, but also how's that going to look with meeting some of the needs that we haven't been serving in the past. So that's kind of where initially curricularly we've started. If I'm looking at kind of our short-term priorities, I'm just going to kind of go review some of this list with you. A lot of it comes from continuing the great work that was done previously. There's a lot of community outreach that happens in this district, which is a wonderful thing to continue to build on. So for example, continuing to promote in the community-based programs such as the food pantry that exists in each school, the Polished Dental program, which has already gone off and running this year. Additionally, we want to continue to focus on data collection. One of my history is really looking at data and trying to break down how that shows up at different levels within the school. So for example, continuing the 40 Assets Survey, the Signs of Suicide program. One of the things that we're really focused on this year is to become compliant with the ESPER screening that we're supposed to be doing. We actually recently just created a partnership with MGH and Harvard Medical School to get some support with that. So we're going to be kind of taking on this endeavor over the next few years with working collaboratively with those two entities to help promote that screening. That screening is the screening it's a brief intervention and treatment. It's asked about substance use and abuse for older kids, and it looks to identify through one-on-one conversations students who are at risk. And so this collaborative program that we're joining is really going to help us do that in a way that we think will have a bigger impact on student outcomes. Additionally, we've already started to identify professional development for staff. Part of this partnership that we have is going to help supplement that, which I'm really looking forward to. Additionally, we want to look at how this new wellness policy is going to be showing up curricularly and how it provides wellness programming for not just our students, but also for our staff, because that is a bigger part that tends to be neglected by most, is recognizing that our staff wellness is also a valuable commodity that a lot of times doesn't get as prioritized as student, which rightfully so. But at the same time, our faculty members are really they are the instrument for how our students learn. And if we don't take care of that instrument, that impacts how our students come out. And then lastly, personally for me, developing relationships with student groups with the goal being to promote institutional, individual, and community wellness initiatives. Our students are our most valuable resource when it comes to understanding what they need and what they need to thrive. And I feel specifically in regards to their wellness, students really have a short-sighted view of how their behaviors really impact them. So trying to create better connections with those groups over time. More long-term, just looking at a few things that are priorities for me. One of them is starting to develop a little bit more practical mindfulness routines in classrooms. Mindfulness is, as we know, it's an essential tool for student success, but it's really hard to build in consistently. So trying to identify strategies where that can really help both faculty and students. Identifying and implementing staff wellness programs, because, as I said, staff wellness also tends to get neglected, so I hope that is something that we're going to be able to focus on. An example here of our new partnership with MGH is utilizing different grant programs to help supplement wellness programming. I do think there's so many grants out there with mental health that can help really support schools in better ways and just help do some of the legwork that gets brought into when we deal with mental health, whether it comes to program design, whether it comes to getting students the services that they need. So looking at those avenues. As I mentioned before, developing a needs assessment based on the curriculum that we have and how that's going to align with new state standards. Specifically in regards to health education, I think there's currently there's some gaps in our curriculum just based off my first view through, and I think it just comes down to the new frameworks really look at how health shows up in your life beyond high school. And I don't think they were really focused on that previously. And so being able to support our students in a different way, it's going to be a priority for that. And then the last two, just developing community partners to help supplement wellness curriculum, identifying what strengths we already have in our community. Between 3 communities serving 1 school, there are people out there who are willing to put in the work to help out our students in many different ways. So identifying who those stakeholders are and figuring out what's the best way to bring them in. And then lastly, identify opportunities to build an inclusive school community by implementing wellness-based student programming at K through 12. The student programming part is something that every teacher does now. They really work at, building in SEL work into their classrooms. They really work at building in mindfulness, but now it's about identifying what strategies work. How can we replicate that? There's teachers who thrive in this environment, and then there's teachers who just haven't caught up to that current practice level. And so how do we share that with every staff member, and how do we start to build that up? Not just so one teacher is kind of carrying the water for the entire building. How do we build that out so every teacher in all 3 levels can really help support their students outside of what they've done in the past? So I know it's a lot. It's a fun list to put together, but I also think just after my first 2 months here, I see a lot of room for growth to build off of a lot of the positive programs that already exist. And I think that this structure that's here and the support that we've had from central office is really going to help this get a really clear view of what we're going to need to do over the next 9 months to finish out the year, and then looking into the future about how we can better support our students.
Thank you, Matt. Does anybody have any questions for Matt? Go ahead, Paul.
So I'm just wondering if the concept of practical mindfulness, does that intersect at all with cell phone usage?
I think I would say so, yeah. I think part of that is going to be about self-regulation above all else, and that's something that mindfulness really focuses on. And so, yes, that has to do with that avenue a lot.
So in that body of knowledge, is there a focus that maybe we could begin this at the elementary level and make it a habit like seatbelts?
Self-regulation is going to be one of the main tiers of mindfulness, and understanding when what your body's telling you and how does that help you move forward. So I think it's going to become a part of that practical plan, recognizing like how students are, one, utilizing their free time, how students with their free choice time that they have, whether that's at home or in school, giving them the tool set so they can actually interact with the things that are necessary in today, like a cell phone, but do so in a way that isn't destructive, and also building dependency.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I felt like I should have introduced Matt to Paul Lees, a committee member who really cares about cell phone usage in our
That's
new
great.
policy.
Interest around the ESPER, if I've pronounced it correctly, the the screening, referral, and brief intervention program. You said that it was partly sponsored with MGH and Brigham. So
MGH and Harvard.
Harvard, okay. So one of the concerns I see in my work is the shortage of behavioral health providers. We know that's happening. Can you give us those examples of what kind of referrals that would come about from these screening tools?
I can. Full disclosure, we got to this meeting this morning, actually yesterday morning, I'm sorry. We were notified that we were a part of this program. So we're at the very, very beginning of getting the depth of the information. But I can say this. So the brief intervention is a one-on-one interview that happens. And students who qualify for the next level essentially is a referral. It's based on their responses, and it's based on whether or not the student is demonstrating at-risk behaviors. So that then transfers over to like the next level of care, which through this program is going to be part of how we decide what that is. In the past, that can be passed on to an adjustment counselor or a school-based clinician, but we're still in the very early stages of figuring out what that next level will be. But the idea here is that we are providing essentially, and again, not getting too far into this program is providing us with a 0.5 professional to come in to work specifically with our school to help deal with this, and not necessarily take the referral all the way to the end, but more so to help facilitate those referrals in a more positive environment for the student and for staff.
So just to clarify, because that was a question or a conversation we had, that person who comes in .5, our understanding at the current moment is that's not a clinician. So that's not an LI or a licensed mental health counselor support the implementation of the SBIRT, which is, we should say, is a DESE requirement. So that is something we're required to do anyway. This is a new partnership looking at other ways to find better ways to implement it.
And just to be clear, the .5 is covered by them. Yeah, for 5 years, so.
Does anybody else have any other questions? Go ahead, Paul.
You have another one, I'm sorry. So could you comment on what you think the appropriate staffing levels would be when we have our wellness program completely up and running?
Yeah, that's a dangerous question. No, I do think, I come from a health education background, and right now, what's currently happening throughout most middle school and high school in Triton is that they're being blended together, which works, which can work. It's a wellness model that looks at the knowledge base that you develop, the classroom-like skills that you need, and also brings in a level of physical activity to that. What I think is changing most in health education is that the clinical side of brain development and student psychology is becoming a class of its own. And I think over time, transitioning to helping students understand themselves and understand how their choices are really rippling out into not just the consequences, but also reflections of who they are and reflections of their upbringing and their core beliefs and how that is really impactful for who you're going to be the next 20 years. I think you can't have enough. If we're looking at it realistically, I think we need to supplement at the middle school and high school to have a full-time health teacher at each, and bringing in more support at the elementary. Currently, we have an SEL teacher who rotates through 3 elementaries, and she does excellent work. The issue that I immediately see is just that there's a timing component to that makes it challenging. If you get the SEL teacher in the fall, you're setting those kids up in the fall for having that skill base for the rest of the school year. If that SEL teacher rotates there in the spring, ships have sailed. Like that's really hard. Your school year is kind of late, to have these new skills brought in. And yes, it's still extremely beneficial. But when we're talking about how that's impact that student's learning throughout the year, it's an area that we can do more in. And so looking at how this would affect long-term staffing, I think there's clear needs that need to be addressed over time. And we have no thought that this is going to be solved tomorrow, but we do think that if we put a long-term plan together based on our needs assessment with these new standards, looking at how we can better help our students' mental health, how we can better help their coping mechanisms, and how we can help prepare them more for beyond, I think it's steps that we're going to have to look to take in the next couple of years.
Any other questions? Matt, looking at this list, for the short amount of time you've been here, I think you have hit the ground running very well.
Thank
And
you.
these goals and priorities look like we're heading in the right direction.
Thank you.
I want to thank you for your time.
All right.
Thank you for coming, Matt. I will say, too, we've had several good hires this year. Matt is a good example. I look forward to the work he will be doing in the next 9 months and then the long-term goals that he has as well. So appreciate it.
All right. Thank you. Thank you.
You can stay all night if you want, but you don't have to.
Want to make a motion? We have to approve that, right? Do we have to approve? No, okay. The next item is the 2023 MCAS and Accountability Report. With the release of the spring MCAS results on the day before the school improvement plan presentations last month, the school principals were able to fold some high-level data for their schools into the presentations on short notice. Since then, Dr. Bates, the Director of Curriculum Instruction and Assessment, has had some time for further analysis and is going to present that tonight.
Thank you. So I am going to present to you tonight our accountability and assessment results. And I'm going to first start off with accountability. We've returned to the accountability system from pre-COVID, where in the past year we weren't fully up to that same system. So I will talk about district accountability and school accountability. I will do an overview of our MCAS data, starting at the state level, and then looking at district and school. And it was requested to bring some cohort data so we could follow students from one grade level to the next. So we're going to take a look at some of that. And then I do want to spend some time talking about our data review processes here and what we do with multiple data points prior to taking action. And then I'll share some of the improvement efforts that we have going on. Okay, so we have returned to the pre-pandemic accountability system, which is based on multiple years of data. It includes academic achievement data, growth data, high school completion, progress of our English language learners, advanced coursework completion, as well as chronic absenteeism. And our district accountability classification is not requiring assistance or intervention. And we are in the category of substantial progress towards the target. So this is all about the accountability measures that were put in place for us for this year. So we have a district accountability, and we also have school-based, I'm not going to get into school yet. I'll tell you a little bit more about district. We had our strengths in district accountability were achievement in mathematics and growth in mathematics. Achievement in non-high school science, technology, and engineering, so that would include both the elementary and at the middle school level. Advanced coursework completion at the high school, and then we also had a decline in non-high school chronic absenteeism across the district, which all went into our district accountability rating. Opportunities for growth, it would be achievement in English language arts, and then achievement in high school science, technology, and engineering as well. So 2 opportunities for growth. In terms of school-based accountability, we have a lot of, I think, good things, a lot to celebrate here. We had Newbury Elementary at substantial progress towards their targets with strength in growth in mathematics, achievement in science, technology, engineering, but an opportunity for growth in achievement in English language arts. And that is the same accountability level as Pine Grove as well. So also substantial progress towards targets, strengths in growth in math, achievement in science, technology, and engineering, and then also looking for an opportunity for growth and achievement in English language arts. That's going to be a theme across all of this data. For Salisbury Elementary, also not requiring assistance or intervention, moderate progress towards the targets that were set. Strength would be achievement in mathematics, and then similar to the other 2 elementaries, opportunity for growth in achievement in English language arts. For the middle school, substantial progress towards
Hannah,
target.
can I just ask a question?
Sure.
I don't see any achievement in STE or any mention of that for Salisbury.
So that was not noted as either a strength or an area for growth necessarily on the school-based accountability data, but I will present that data when we take a look at Salisbury's achievement data on the 3 assessments.
Okay, thank you.
So middle school, substantial progress towards targets, strength in mathematics achievement, English language arts achievement, a decline in chronic absenteeism, and then an opportunity for growth, achievement in science, technology, and engineering. High school also was not requiring any assistance or intervention, moderate progress towards their targets, strengths in achievement in mathematics, advanced coursework completion, and then, as I noted on the district accountability, an opportunity for growth would be achievement in high school science, technology, and engineering, which is in grade 9 on the biology assessment, and then also improvement on the graduation rate as well. All right, are there any questions about accountability data at this point?
So just, I guess, a comment. I note in all 3 elementary schools that we had opportunity for growth in ELA, right? But last year was also our first year of implementing CKLA. And I'll get more to that later.
Yes, yes. It is an opportunity for growth around, and I can certainly speak to that. I think we also see it as an opportunity for growth potentially at the middle school too when we look at the data. We were first year of implementation and then also in a year of pilot at grades 6, 7, and 8. We tend to see a dip in terms of achievement scores and then see that come back up. So if we're following trends with based on implementation science, hopefully with the continued support we have, and we have a lot of support right now for the implementation of CKLA through some grant funding we secured on the implementation of high-quality instructional materials. We are working very, very closely with a partner. We are partnered with a group called Instruction Partners through DESE, and there's a lot of work going on, and I can share some of those highlights with you. But we had walkthroughs at the end of the school year by Instruction Partners. We've already had walkthroughs this year through all elementary schools and all grade levels, and we're seeing some progress and some movement based on the changes that we have made. And this work that we're doing with them is really about increasing our own capacity. So it's not that this group is coming in and doing things for us, that they're coming in and they're working alongside us to increase our own capacity for implementation. So I think it's going to be helpful in K through 5 ELA. I think it's going to be helpful in 6 through 8 ELA. And honestly, I think it's going to be helpful in any new curriculum that I'm supporting the implementation of, because I'm learning so much from this process too. So that was a long answer, but.
So I just want to ask a couple questions about the statement, not requiring assistance or intervention. Is that a DESE/state standard, or is that a Triton standard?
That is a state accountability. Like you're either requiring assistance or intervention or you are not.
And what are the other state standards?
Requiring assistance or intervention.
There's only 2, that's it? And what's the difference between assistance and intervention?
There are different levels of support. Can you speak a little bit to this?
With a little more detail without getting into it, so there's state intervention where the state comes in and assists. So kind of like they partner alongside with you on down to the state taking over, right? Was it Holyoke was one of the more recent ones, Lawrence, where the state literally comes in, places a receiver in place of the superintendent, makes changes to the school committee, and literally overtakes the district because they failed to perform. So we would move first to having someone sit alongside us saying, let's move it along here, we need to improve. And then the next step is, you're not improving even with the state pumping resources and personnel and staffing into support, then they eventually take it over.
And the other question I had is about growth versus achievement. Can you distinguish or define what the difference is between those two?
Sure. So in terms of the accountability, in accountability, we're set targets for achievement and then targets for growth. So all of this is based on the targets that were set for us. Achievement would be the percentage of students who are meeting or exceeding expectations in any particular area. And then the growth is about how those students are improving compared to their peers with similar testing histories. So.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so if I can, I'll shift now to a little bit from the accountability system to our MCAS data overview. Across the state, MCAS is still lower than 2019, so scores generally lower than pre-pandemic, but have improved since 2022. The state saw an increase in math in grades 3 through 8 by 2 points, but it remained the same in grade 10. ELA increased slightly, just by 1 point in grades 3 through 8, remained the same in grade 10. And then a slight decrease in science, technology, and engineering in grade 3 through 8, as well as the high school. So these are state trends, state achievement trends. We don't necessarily reflect these. So I'll kind of go into our district overview as well. Okay, so these 3 graphs show you district achievement. So this includes all students that took the test in a particular area. So it's not broken down by school. You will see in ELA, we had 49% of our students who are meeting or exceeding expectations. That is the exact same number as our previous year. And it remains 4% over the state average. Math, we were at 8 percentage points over the previous year, at 47% of our students meeting and exceeding expectations, and 6% over the state average. And then for science, technology, and engineering, 3 percentage points over last year for 52% of our students meeting or exceeding expectations, and that's 9% over the state average. So you can see we don't exactly reflect the trends from the state. Kind of similar in ELA, not fairly flat, but we have some more significant increases in mathematics, and then also as well as science, technology, and engineering. So the next slide you will see, this is Newbury Elementary and achievement in ELA, math, and science, technology, and engineering. So once again, the green, that short bluish green line is Newbury Elementary, and the dotted line is the state. So in ELA, Newbury had 59% of its students meeting and exceeding expectations, which is 15 percentage points over the state average. Math, 58%, which was up 9 points from 2002, and is 16% over the state average. Science, technology, and engineering, so the test in grade 5, we had 67% of our students meeting and exceeding expectations, up 6 points from 2022, and that's 24 points over the state average. For Pine Grove, 53% of students were meeting and exceeding expectations in English language arts, up 1 point from 2022, and 8% over the state average. Math, 55% of our students were meeting and exceeding expectations, up 4 points from 2022, and 13 over the state average. And then science, technology, and engineering, 66% were meeting or exceeding expectations, up 14 from 2022, and 23% over the state average. So next we have Salisbury Elementary. We had 29% of our students meeting and exceeding expectations in ELA, which was a 7% decrease from 2022, and 15 percentage points below the state average. Math, 30% of our students meeting or exceeding expectations, which was up by 6 percentage points from 2022, and 12 percentage points below the state average. And science, technology, and engineering, we had 33% meeting and exceeding expectations, which was down 14% from 2022 and 10% below the state average. For the middle school, ELA, 50% meeting and exceeding, up 4 points from 2022 and 5 points over the state average. Math, 44% meeting and exceeding expectations, and that's up 7% from 2022 and 2 percentage points over the state average. And then in science, technology, and engineering, 58% meeting and exceeding expectations, up 6 from 2022, and that's 15% over the state average. Okay, and then finally for the high school, in ELA, we had 59% of students meeting and exceeding expectations, down 1 from 2022, but 14% over the state average. Math, we have 59% meeting and exceeding expectations, an increase of 12% from 2022, and 17% over the state average. And then for science, technology, and engineering, and once again, this is our biology test in freshman year, 46% meeting and exceeding expectations, the same score as 2022, and just 2 points over the state average. So I think there's a lot to celebrate here. We have some areas where we have put in a lot of work, and then we have areas where we still need to put in a lot of work and have some more support that we can provide to, I think, to our schools, to our teachers, to our students. Any questions? Yeah.
Just looking at, can you go back to the high school slide?
Yep.
There's data points missing there for us?
Oh, yes. Thank you. This is the second year of the implementation of the next generation MCAS test, so we only have 2 years of data for that.
We're not putting in the older data since it's the new?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Just looking at I think the biggest outlier that I see in any of this is the SES ELA. Is there any data or theory beyond the CKLA, which would factor into the other schools as well, that might explain that, or that you're looking at right now?
Yes. There's a lot of other data that we are looking at right now. In terms of, so we are looking at iReady data. The iReady data is very reflective of that MCAS data as well. We are looking at our DIBELS data as that comes in our earlier grades. We are looking at observational data, getting into classrooms. We recently held a focus group about student learning, so we're really trying to get as much information as we can to be able to provide the right level of support, because we need to do something to better support some of those students.
I guess I phrased that wrong, because I would never have doubted you were looking at data. Is that data pointing anywhere at this point, or is it still kind of early?
So I think, let me think. Yes, I think there are some areas that we can improve upon, and one of them I think is coming out of post-pandemic is really, and this goes into our work on belonging and on equity, is holding high expectations for all students. And there was a little, and this is years ago now, but there's, I think, residual effects from this, from thinking they didn't receive a full year of education in 2020, so therefore we need to back up a little bit and maybe not give them grade level standards, or we need to refill in some of these gaps and we can't move forward. So that is not happening anymore. We have all of our students accessing grade level curriculum, but I do think what we're seeing now is a little bit of that impact.
So some of this predates you in your role. But the trend is super clear. And I'm just wondering, some of this was pre-pandemic. So the pandemic obviously made it a wider gap. Is there anything we can do more immediate that we're not doing? Because it hasn't really gone in the proper direction since about 2018. And I know there's a pandemic, and I know that there were decisions made in a certain cohort of students where they relearned an entire grade level, so that's super reflective that that didn't work out. But is there anything kind of soon that, I know we're looking at data, and it's a hard ship to turn around, but is there an immediate response to this? Because now we're talking years of learning loss. And that's kind of going to catch up when, and then I feel bad for the middle school as they progress, because that is years of learning loss.
So I'd like to think of it as like we have to meet them where they are, whether it's loss or not. This is where our students are. And I think one thing that we have done is we've provided every teacher with high-quality instructional materials for their classroom, and then the training and support that they need to use that most effectively. So I think that is one thing that we can do, and we started to do, and we need to continue to do is, and I think asking the teachers too, making sure we are giving them exactly what they need to use these well, to feel that they can really have an impact on student learning by using these. So I met with a group of elementary teachers this afternoon, our district-wide CKLM implementation team, to talk about what's going well, what do we need support with. They're very open, they communicate with their own teams, they bring the information back. So I think we have the structures in place to provide more support. Some other, in Salisbury in particular, another thing that I can speak more about a little bit later is our co-teaching initiative there. There are, let me get the numbers right, make sure that I have the numbers who were trained, but we started this when we were awarded a grant. And the beginning work in this was about preparing the leadership of that school to make sure that everything was set up for this initiative to be successful. So it began with days upon days of meetings to ensure that we had the staff, that they were scheduled correctly, that before we even talked about who's going to be trained in this. So we have a number of co-teaching teams right now. They have all received training in this. They are receiving coaching in it throughout the school year. They have common planning time with their co-teaching teams each week. So that is one thing that's particular to Salisbury, and it was a grant that was awarded based on the demographics of that community. We weren't eligible for that anywhere else. One thing I will say too is that when you said they were kind of adversely impacted by the pandemic, I think that's following a national trend as well, that families and students of who are more economically disadvantaged were more negatively impacted by the pandemic than those who were not. So when we look at national trends of like, there was a 10% decrease in achievement in ELA, that's probably more like a 15% decrease for students of low income and a 6% increase or so for those that weren't. So it's, and it's not to say that all students in that school are low income, but it is certainly a area in which we receive extra support for. We received Title I funding. We received the co-teaching funding for, and we meet the students where they are.
Thank you, and I'm not doubting it. I'm just, and then my other question is, are parents, and I won't talk specifically of Salisbury, but in the district, are they super aware of this data per school? Like if you're a Triton Middle School student, are your parents caregivers, your humans at home, being like seeing this data for real? Because I think it's eye-opening. I don't think a lot of caregivers are seeing it kind of like this, because this is probably the easiest way to take it in. And Paul Mayette made that point the last meeting, and I wonder if that could help assist in maybe assisting the classroom and the teachers with support at home.
Yeah, I don't know that. I think if families are receiving their own children's scores and probably are, unless they're going out and seeking that information or not, or unless they're live streaming in this evening.
I understand that we have to meet them where they're at, but this just seems to have been a trend over the last few years, that this is going in the wrong direction. We need to do what we can to turn this around. I mean, we can't continue to come back here every year saying that Salisbury's low income. No, I'm just saying, we have to raise the bar for those kids. We have to let them know that it doesn't matter if you're low income or have struggles, that we bring them into our schools and we should be able to educate our students.
100%. I agree with you. And I think that's that first step of having high expectations for all students and saying everyone can achieve this high level, these grade level standards. I think even talking with the group today that like everybody has a Chromebook now that they can bring home, and everybody has access to their online materials, and that's not something that just is for people who might have a family computer at home. That we believe that all students can. Yeah, I don't mean at all to use any economic status as any excuse. But this is our community, and we have students of low income in all three of our communities. And so I think there's that balance between acknowledging, like, there are sometimes additional challenges that families undergo, and we need to be mindful of what those are, but not lower our expectations because of that.
Right.
Provide extra levels of support because of
Yeah,
that.
that's because I don't want these students of low income to feel, well, I'm low income, so I can't achieve anything.
No, absolutely not.
When we say that the kids bring the Chromebooks home, do we make sure that every student is able to access, like if they have to get online for school or anything like that, we make sure that all of our students are able to access that?
Yeah, and this is a work in progress. Every student has, I think first grade up now has an individual device. Actually getting the students to, and I think getting teachers to feel comfortable that this is not only okay for them to do, but this is encouraged, and here's why, and understanding the reason for it. We still have some work to do in that. And I think a piece of that too is communicating with families about why this is important and why we've provided access to each student, and all of the things that they can access from that too. Like I'm just floored with like the changes in curriculum materials over the past 5 years and what you can do with them now. And when we send home a device with a student, they have built-in scaffolds for them that are going to help them read, help them comprehend, provide them feedback immediately when they are sort of headed in the wrong direction with their understanding. And that we just need to make sure that we're giving that to all of our students.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Paul.
So students go in and they take the MCAS and the ELA test, and they might get a passage that they're supposed to answer questions about. The passage might be something about the Battle of New Orleans. And so then they answer questions, right? And if they have background knowledge in the War of 1812 and what the Battle of New Orleans is, then they have better chance of answering those questions correctly, even though the MCAS is supposed to be testing, here's something you've never seen before, can you comprehend it? Is that sort of how that works?
That is exactly how that works, and I think that...
So following up, right? So pulling that piece out, because the second grade curriculum has War of 1812 in CKLA, right? So we're implementing this curriculum in part with the hope that we're providing core knowledge now to these students. They have a better opportunity to answer those correctly, right? So I asked earlier, last year was our first year of implementing CKLA. In part, that research there on that curriculum it closes that wealth gap on these tests because it's providing that core knowledge. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yeah, I would say that for CKLA as well as, and that's since the one we adopted, but I would also say the same applies for EL education as well, that all of the curriculum materials now that are sort of deemed these high quality instructional materials are meeting that sort of that broad content knowledge, and for the reason that everyone, and I guess it's related to equity as well, is that when you go into the next grade level, everybody has that same level of background knowledge and can hang their new learning on that.
I think it would also be remiss not to acknowledge the fact that there's been a lot of transition at Salisbury Elementary, right? The reality is this confluence of a lot of change And that matters, right? Continuity in leadership and educational support and educators, it makes a profound impact. And I think you're seeing some of that here. So those changes, I wish we could go back and change some things, right? Things happen. But the reality is, even predating Anna and myself, right? Salisbury's been a Title I school for decades, I believe. And there's been multiple attempts to use that additional funding to buy additional resources and additional curricula. So there was a major shift for Salisbury because they had other curricula that the other schools didn't have. So there's been change even there. So it's personnel, it's resources. So now they're going to, as a result of that, they're going to feel that implementation dip that Anna spoke of even more than the other two elementary schools that have had more stability moving forward. So we should see a rebound, right? So this year we've talked a lot about, and Anna will get to that later in the presentation, the work we still have to do, and she's referenced some of that. So there's a lot of work to do, and it's not an excuse. But there are a lot of factors that are present at Salisbury that aren't present at Newbury or at Pine Grove that aren't simply about socioeconomic status. So.
I understand that, but we have to hold ourselves and you accountable to make sure that this turns the other way. We can't keep coming back here every year. I'm not saying with an excuse, but explaining why we didn't make it, why we didn't turn it the other way. So I won't beat the dead horse.
There are a lot of shifts, and I'm not even going to pick on Salisbury because there's a lot of shifts everywhere. Like, Pine Grove took on a new principal around the same time that Salisbury took on a new principal. This is totally off topic, but it just sort of came into my brain. We focused a lot on teaching math last year. Remember, we had like that hard focus, but then ELA fell. So I'm wondering if there's like a point where we can do both. And I'm just noticing it, and that happened across, when you look, there was that rise in math, and we were super proud of it, and I love that. But that rise in math created a dip in ELA across. So not huge, but I'm super concerned about Salisbury Elementary, and I think I've been saying that for 3 full years. And then I look at this, and it's been happening since before Anna, before Bryant, so it's not a blame. But we're definitely missing something. As a school committee, as admitted, and I know the teachers there are working hard. This is not a matter of effort by the adults in there. But I just struggle, what are we missing that is creating this and not turning it around? So I'm not sure if there's any movement in kind of the out of the box, what are we missing? Why aren't we connecting with students at this point? And that's why I bring up caregivers and parents. Is that the piece we're missing? That involvement piece where they come in and they see this and realize they can step in and help. Because I don't see a lot of that going on in Salisbury, and I don't know if it's going on in Newbury or Pine Grove either. I'm not there. So that's my kind of big overarching question, is how involved are students as a whole within the community in dealing with this problem?
So, Linda, I agree with you generally about, the need to improve, but to Brian's point, I think it's really hard when your staff is changing, when your administrators are changing. I think there's a lot of truth to that, okay? Because it's like when a teacher goes out mid-year for health reasons, for whatever reason, and they're putting in substitutes, it's not the same thing. And when you had veteran teachers step out in 2020, I think that veteran, old, whatever, call it however you want to, I think that had a severe impact on all the schools. And so I just think Brian's point is well taken, but, I have a couple of questions, and they're not tied to this accountability report, but I heard in the news that half of the third graders in the state are not reading at grade level. Have you dug into that at all or read anything about that to determine whether or not that's factually accurate or just whether the news sources are throwing it out there?
I have not dug into the state level data as much as I have our own local data.
Okay. And how would, or how does the state receive data about third grade students, whether they're reading at grade level or not?
My guess would be they're using MCAS scores from the percentage of students who are meeting and exceeding expectations.
Okay. So the third grade MCAS has a reading component?
Yes.
And my second question is, I heard also in the news, and I'm sorry for throwing these out, and I'll be very quick, but I heard in the news also that Boston Public Schools is somehow going to try to implement some rejiggering of the methodology of instruction. Did you hear anything about that? No?
I'm not aware of that.
They're going to do something about methodology of instruction in Boston Public Schools, and they're thinking that this is going to make a big impact to get the MCAS scores to go from down to back to where they were.
My guess is it's the science of reading. That's the buzzword that it's been years, right? We've been talking about that. Yeah. And I do think that data is accurate. So the Globe, even before superintendents this year, yes, all of us had a bone to pick. The Globe had the information before superintendents did as far as raw data. So they're likely just disaggregating raw data and then the categories meeting or exceeding expectations. Anyone who's not in the meeting or exceeding expectations is considered failing, right? They put their own terms on it. So that is accurate data that more than half of the students, I want to say it's 52, 53% of third graders were below meeting expectations. And just one thing to close the loop back, not that it closes the loop, I will hang my hat on the work that's happening last year and this year to yield improvement. But it's not 1 year improvement, right? It's not 2 year improvement. It's culture, it's expectations, it's, right, it goes all the way back to, right, we need more time in the day. It goes back to the question Paul had about, could we find a little more time for lunch, right? There's so much that we're trying to pack into the day that, yes, we still, I don't like it, none of us like it, but we've paid so much attention to math that ELA dips. It shouldn't be, right? We have to find a way to do both, but I believe that the changes that have been made last year and into this year will yield results.
I just want you to know that I have all the confidence that, especially with your goals that you're going to present, that you are committed to turning this around. It's just from a school committee member or a parent that lives in that community, when people come to you about these scores every single year, it's hard to give them, lack of a better word, hope that it's going to change around, you know? So with your goals this year, I think we can show the community that we're really committed to turning not only Salisbury, but all of the schools around.
Is the other question I had, one of the major impacts, lower income families had larger impact from the pandemic. One of the reasons for that was more missed time. I guess I'm just wondering over, the 21-22 and 22-23 school years, how many students did we have in Salisbury missing 10%, 15%, 20% of the days compared to NES and Pine Grove? I would actually be interested in seeing that data from the last couple of years and sort of broken out into enough buckets, percentage bins to sort of get a reasonable comparison.
So we have a lot of conversations. A regional school district is an interesting beast, especially when you have 3 such disparate communities. And we have lots of conversations at the high school level, right? We want to say we're one Triton, we're one entity, but that ignores, turns a blind eye to the realities and the data that we need to look at. And there is more chronic absenteeism with Salisbury students. and that's not a judgment, that's a statement, so that, and it's very difficult to put that out there and share that in a way that's factual, non-judgmental, to follow up and say, if we believe in equity, then what are we doing about it? And it's a very difficult conversation, but that's certainly data we can pull together.
Yeah, no, that's 16.
Oh, I'm sorry,
No. So I want to transition a little bit to the cohort data, and I feel like this is very positive to me. So we wanted to see growth over time, and I think that's what we're seeing in this. So this first slide is our current junior class. So you can see this is ELA. 2018, we see an increase, a little increase to 2019. So this is, those blue is meeting and exceeding expectations, so that's our achievement. Red is growth. So we see a little increase up to 2019. We had no testing in 2020 due to the pandemic. 2021 was an abbreviated test, and you see that significant dip. And then we're growing again in grade 10. So when we wanted to say, let's just not measure the same test with different kids each year, now we're talking about here are the same students and they are making progress over time. This is also ELA, Achievement and Growth. This is our current freshman class. So you can see growing pre-pandemic, and then a little bit of a drop, and then coming back up in 2023. So this ELA, MCAS, and Achievement and Growth, this is our class of 2029, so our current 7th graders. Once again, we're seeing them trending in the right direction. And then you'll notice this, I switched over to, back to that initial cohort. This is our current junior class for mathematics. We see that group growing from 5th graders to 6th graders, the drop in the pandemic, and then an increase again in grade 10.
Can I ask a question there? And you may not have the answer. With achievement growth that high from grade 8 to grade 10, doesn't the SGP seem like it ought to be higher? So, like, I went back and looked at some of the state stuff, and the state wasn't growing. Just seems odd to me.
So the SGP would be comparison to those with similar testing history. So my guess is that everybody followed this trend kind of that lower achievement, and then that.
I mean, that would explain it. I didn't see that in the state data that was back there. It's just weird. I'm just curious.
I thought the same thing. So if it were a student and how she or he grew compared to last year, that would have to be true. But because it's like performing peers, again, I get it, you have to have metrics but it's not a perfect science. And in this case, I think there's an argument to say when you are growing, it's not an accurate representation necessarily. In those cases, you have to look at the achievement.
So this is our current 9th grade class. You can see going from 36 to 47% meeting and exceeding pre-pandemic, and then dropping down to 33, but then moving up to 35, and then 39. So
I was going to say, to Paul's point there, right, 21 to 22, achievement grew 2 points, but the growth percentile went up 7%. So again, wish it was our data.
what?
But the growth percentile at 50% would roughly mean that you're staying cohort to cohort across the state, right? Because that means that if you're growing at 50%, half of the students with your testing ability, testing history, have done the same thing or done better, and half have done worse. So if you're seeing those growth percentiles around 50%, you should see roughly level achievement.
It's like the growth chart of the pediatrician.
Yeah.
Oh, all right, there you go.
But, I mean, and the flip side of that is the grade 3 to grade 4, you have that 11-point jump, but it's because a growth percentile of 60% is actually ridiculously high, because it means that your average student is outperforming similar students, 60% of similar students.
This right here is our current 7th grade class. So once again, moving in the right direction from 28% meaning or exceeding in 2021, so that would be that post-pandemic first assessment, just one test session, to 38 to 53 when they're in 6th grade. This is science, technology, and engineering. We had 58% of students meeting or exceeding when they were in 5th grade, to 53 in 8th grade, and to 46 on this last administration of the biology test, which once again was the second administration of the next generation MCAS. So I'm going to shift a little bit and talk about, I think we spent a lot of time talking about keeping focus on belonging and inclusion, and I think we do need to look at our data through that lens as well. And so I want to take a look at our MCAS data through a lens of equity, and just to identify that we do have a gap, an achievement disparity between students with disabilities and students who don't have disabilities. So this is for ELA across the district. 62% of students without disabilities are meeting or exceeding expectations, and 26% of students with disabilities. And that's in ELA. This next slide here shows you that that gap across schools, and it's similar. What this just shows you is that we do have a difference in the achievement of students with disabilities and those without across all of our schools. And so this is an area on which we need to focus. And just as we have students with disabilities across all of our schools, we also have students, low-income students across all of our schools, and we have a very, very similar gap between students with disabilities and our students with low income and those who are not. And then we have that similar, you can also see that across all of the schools. So this is just our ELA data. Math data looks similar in terms of the percentage of students meeting and exceeding expectations in each one of those categories, as well as the gaps across schools. So I do think it's important to take a look at this and to say that all of our students belong. All of our students need a quality education, and all of our students we need to have high expectations for them, and then have conversations about what kind of support are we going to put in place so that everybody can achieve to a high level. In terms of our data review processes, I just want to be very hesitant that we are not jumping to find solutions from one data point. And state assessment data, it's a starting point. It's an important one. I think it's one that we can look at and then say, what else do we need to go find? What else do we need to learn in order to make improvements? So our process would be to gather multiple data points, to then say, all right, where is it that students are struggling? Identify then, change it from like what is a student struggling with to what as educators, can we do differently? And that includes what can administrators do differently, what can classroom teachers do differently, how do we change our practice so that we have different outcomes? And then we monitor that impact and we adjust as needed. So this is something that is a data review process that is part of the culture here. It's part of all of our curriculum reviews. It is part of all of our SST meetings. It is embedded within the culture here that we don't just say, all right, I have one data point and now I'm going to jump and find a solution, that we really have to look carefully at many of them. And something that Matt actually said earlier, I wrote it down, that like students are the most valuable resource in understanding student needs. And I feel like we don't know how to be responsive to students unless we are bringing them into this conversation and we are getting that information from students as well. So additional data points that we do collect, we do regularly benchmark students in math and in reading using iReady, using DIBELS for students in K through 3. Forefront is our early numeracy screener. So we are, in addition to that state level data that we get once per year, we're collecting this data multiple times per year. And I always think it's not worth the time for assessment if you're not going to do anything with it. So if we're taking that time from instruction to gather this information, we need to make sure that we're using that to inform our practice and our improvement efforts. So one additional data point that we have been really using over the past year is observational data, and some of this came from our work with instruction partners, and this is a picture of one of the classes that was visited last spring. I would include photographs as data as well, what students are doing in that. And then this was also notes that were taken by our observer, that in every classroom we visited, there was evidence of the use of the CKLA knowledge curriculum. Students were working within their domain workbooks. They had the text in front of them. They were discussing parts of the text of the class in small groups. So this comes from our landscape analysis that came from our partnership with instruction partners. But I think that it shouldn't be a group of administrators or even a group of teachers sitting around a table with data in front of them, that we need to get into the classrooms, find out what is actually happening there, have conversations with the students, with the teachers, and find out how do we work together, because this is our school and our district. So we've been doing a lot more of that observational data. We've also been running a number of focus groups. This came out of the Math Curriculum Review Committee last year. We held focus groups at the elementary and the middle school level. More recently, we've had them, actually last Friday, there were some CKLA focus groups with students from K through 6 in them. And it's amazing what you can learn about how students learn best and what engages students when you ask them. So I do think that that's a really important part. It's not a replacement, and it doesn't negate anything that comes on this, but we need to take a look at the whole picture in order to make the most improvement that we can. So I just wanted to, this is a structure that we've been talking about over the last 2 years, really, with some of our groups who have been adopting new curriculum, and the importance of the instructional core, so that if we really want to improve student outcomes, and we're talking about like, what are we going to do now? How are we going to do this? There are really, this is Dr. Richard Elmore, who is a former professor at Harvard University, says there are only 3 things you can do. And you can change the level of the content that students are provided with. You can increase the skill and knowledge of the teachers, so make the teaching more effective, or you can increase the level of the students' active engagement with that content. So when we think about improvement efforts, they are, Caitlin, when you asked about like, what have we done? I think that rigorous content and that bringing these 2 new curricula into our ELA classrooms is a very, very important and impactful first step that we won't see the impact of immediately, but I do think that we're going to. And then that effective teaching practice, where we're continuing to work on strong implementation, and that's not a 1-year project either. So we do have a lot of things that are going on, and I do very strongly feel that we are moving in the right direction. We have the right people around the table. We have the right teachers in the classrooms. We are having the right conversations and making the right changes right now. So we now have implementation of high-quality instructional materials in grade K through 8 ELA classrooms. This year, we are beginning the exploration of high-quality instructional materials in grades 7 through Algebra 2 mathematics, because well, for a number of reasons, but one, we didn't have them, and two, that it's going to fix some alignment issues that I think we have. We're in stage 1 of our science, technology, and engineering curriculum review process, which is an assessment stage, so we will get the group back together, including classroom teachers, special educators, EL teachers, administrators at all of the levels, to gather a lot of information, find out what's working, what's not, where do we need to make some shifts. We have the mathematics action plan that I presented to you last spring. So there are a number of different action steps that we're moving forward with from that. The co-teaching model, another very, very new initiative, and one that I'm hopeful that we'll see some impact with when we look at mid-year growth data, but it is very new at this point. Along with that, and I think planning for that co-teaching model allowed for a restructuring of win times at Salisbury Elementary too, and really the freeing up the people who need to be there to best support students, so that we have Tier 2 support occurring at that time. We have Tier 3 specialized instruction occurring at that time. We have Title I available at that time, EL. So they're really, those win times are, we have more available support for our students during that time than I think they've ever had before. We're continuing to work with Susan Resnick, our mathematics consultant, primarily at Salisbury Elementary and at the high school. She's going to be working with to move us forward towards our instructional priority that was developed by collaboratively by a group of administrators and math specialists across the district last year, which is really focused on strong Tier 1 instruction in K through 2 mathematics classes. So really making sure that we're building up that strong foundation. She's also going to be working with special educators at Salisbury, and then with the teachers as well as administrators at the high school to better support administrators in in providing feedback that will move math teachers' practice forward as well. I think that most of the schools have school-based implementation teams whenever we have something new, and actually they call them implementation teams even when it's not new. So we have a Math in Focus implementation team that is meeting at each school, even though that we've been implementing it for a long period of time. But they look carefully at their own school-based data. They come up with goals. They put things into action because of that. And one of the things that I love about the work that those school teams do is you can see it almost immediately in the data. I can give you an example at Pine Grove. And I know Nicole spoke a lot, not this past year at her SIP presentation, but the year before, about geometry and that being an area of weakness and or an opportunity for growth. So she scheduled time into the schedule, got resources for the teachers. They were all using either iReady Geometry or ShapeBait or Calendar Math during this time, and had incredible growth in that domain as measured by iReady. And then again, you can see it on the MCAS scores. So these are groups of mostly classroom-based educators, sometimes led by the math specialists or the reading specialists at each school, who they're very goal-driven. I'm just really proud of the work that those educators can do. So when we look at this data in the aggregate here, we miss some of those celebrations of this good work that's happening across the schools. Something else that I think is going to help is our continued district-wide focus on diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. I'm finding just more and more opportunities to have conversations like the one I did today about like, no, these Chromebooks need to go home because we have to provide access for everyone. And what does that look like when we're looking at, what does this look like when we're looking at potential mathematics resources? And just weaving that into the conversation and keeping that central to all of the work that we do here. Yes, Paul?
So when like third, fourth, fifth graders go in and do their mid-year iReady testing, how many hours are they doing that and spread over how many days?
So I'd have to do the, they say it averages about 60 minutes per test. I do think it's a little bit higher than that. That being said, some students finish in 40 and some students finish in a lot longer because it's an adaptive assessment. It sometimes takes longer to, it doesn't necessarily mean if you finish early that you scored really high or scored low. It just means that it was able to adapt to your level very quickly. So we do have some classes where it's taking multiple class periods to do that assessment.
And so like, but on average, if they're doing it in like roughly that 60, 70-minute window, are they doing that in one session or two sessions or
It's
three?
at the middle school level, they generally do it in one. They operate it more, they sort of assess more like they do on an MCAS, where they stop the schedule and they create this iReady schedule. The elementary schools set their own schedules for it, and it's usually coming back multiple times. What I will say about that, though, is there's some real benefit to that because you don't then have that assessment fatigue because it stops where you are, and then you can just shut your Chromebook and come back to it and hop right back in. I actually think it's good for some students who might have some attentional challenges, who could take some breaks.
And they do that 3 times per year, like September roughly, January, and then end of May-ish.
Yeah.
And the teachers have that feedback like within a week or two on how the
immediately.
Immediate feedback, and then the sessions with the coaches and a couple of weeks later.
Yes, so there are data meetings after each administration.
Okay. And so then I guess another question you had in here also was the observations. You're talking about those additional data points of the observations. How often on average would an administrator be in a teacher's classroom for even 5, not as an observation necessarily, but just have a point of contact in that room?
I think it varies. I would say last year and this year especially, I know administrators are trying to be in rooms more routinely, whether it be our implementation of a new evaluation system, not new, tweaked evaluation system that we agreed with the TRTA, but also lots of discussions that we've had with the full team about being in classrooms to just see routinely what's going on. So the question was on average, how often? I know many of the principals are trying to schedule a time every day to be out and about. That doesn't always happen. So I'm not sure on average.
I guess it's not really a numbers question. It's more of a philosophy question because, you know, not gonna lie, I don't like the MCAS. I don't think it measures very much that's meaningful because it's a one test. It's 3 hours at a go. It's a couple of days. Like it's the testing fatigue and a huge percentage of the student variation is nothing to do with what happens in school. But then also we're talking about it now about last year's students. And so it's not like assess so that we can adjust and adapt. And those iReady tests allow us to adjust and adapt and see where each kid's are. And the administrators in the room then allows the administrator to see, oh, I walked in randomly for 2 minutes and the kids had their CKLA books out and the teacher was reading at them, or they're talking together about it, and get a feel for what's going on, because then these student comments you have in here are all about make us do the work, we'll learn better. And just sort of having that hands-on feel about what's going on in your classrooms, I think makes for the faster adjustments, and the iReady testing makes for the faster adjustments about what students really know than having to take 5 years of MCAS data to find out what's happening, because it's administered so infrequently. Anyway.
So if I can just, to speak about making adjustments and changes from more recent data, with CKLA, we have a number of grade levels who are kind of piloting these test trackers this year, which is what we also use for Math in Focus. So you can immediately record and see in a color the students who have met a particular standard or students who struggled with a particular standard on a question. And just even by looking across your class, you can see these patterns and immediately respond to it and look and say, all right, I really struggled. My students struggle with main idea. I need to teach that in a little bit of a different way. Or you can look across and say, well, this particular student seems to be struggling in a number of different areas. What additional support do I need to put in there? So I would say, although we do have data meetings and teachers will look at their MCAS data, and they certainly look at their iReady data, that we really want to use the more immediate, what's in front of you, to make those adjustments.
I'll just make a comment about the iReady. So mine are all in this. So I've got a 2029 and a 2027 now. And they actually interact. My 2029s interact with their iReady. Like, they know, they come home and they tell me what their score was. They tell me what their reach goal was. They tell me 3 points in the year where they've come from. And, you know, that's a 7th grader knowing where they were at the end of 6th grade. And so they're part of the conversation, you know, whereas you get your mail in from your MCAS score, you know, sort of way down the road. I haven't even received mine yet from
Coming.
Yay. They wouldn't even know how to interpret that. So I think it's incredibly valuable to have the schools, I know from very early on, I had to get involved because I have one that, you know, that really struggled with reading and the ELA and has dyslexia. So I got involved and I understood how it worked, and they sat me down at Pine Grove, Shauna McGee, and she went through and she showed us the education, you know, the instructions of how to interpret that data as a parent. And it was incredibly valuable. It stayed with us since when, probably 1st grade, right? First grade all the way through to 6th grade until 7th grade now, where we are looking at, you know, progress. So I think it's just a great tool for everybody, not just educators.
Does anybody else have any questions for Anna? Thank you, Anna, for your presentation.
You're welcome.
And staying with Anna, the summer programming update. At the beginning of the summer, we went through the plans for summer programming. Now that those programs are wrapped up, we will receive a verbal update on how the summer went. Dr. Bates, the Director of Curriculum Instruction and Assessment.
Okay, so I do have an update on just our general education programming in the summer. So we did not have the amount of programming that we ran over the last couple of years with our ESSER funding, but we did have a summer program at Salisbury Elementary, which was partially funded by our Title I funding as well as our ASOST. So it was, what we wanted to do was provide some academic support in both in reading and math, as well as some access to some enrichment activities as well. So we had 46 students who participated in that programming over the summer across grades 1 through 6. And we got some positive feedback from the families related to their students building positive relationships with peers, positive relationships with their teachers, and active engagement in learning. We have to collect some data to maintain some of this grant funding, so this is where some of the survey data came from. But there were also multiple references to having fun and enjoying learning, which is very important and I think goes a long way. So we're hoping that at least the ASOST is a continuation, and we hope to be able to offer more of that engaging programming for students moving forward this year. So we did also have a program funded through ASOST at Pine Grove School. They had 82 students participate in this, grades 1 through 6. It was some STEM focus, some social emotional focus, some health and wellness focus. So it had a little bit less of a academic focus to that really targeted tutoring that we provided to some students as part of that programming at Salisbury. But they did have, it is tied to academic standards as well, particularly in like environmental science and the application of mathematical concepts. Also positive feedback from families. The only thing that I think the constructive criticism we received was have earlier registration, because this was a free program for families, and a lot of families had already committed to camps at the time that we had put this registration out. And then we had Kids Club programming at Salisbury Elementary and Pine Grove School, both open to students from NES as well. And we had 102 students participate in Kids Club programming over the summer. And then, although it wasn't a program that we ran, we had 25 high school students get credit through credit recovery this summer. It was self-pay, so they had to pay for that opportunity, but 24 out of the 25 students who participated did earn credit over the summer. So that was great.
Anna? Thank you, Anna. The next item is the solar net metering. Paul Lees raised the question for a presentation on solar credits during the new business agenda item a couple of meetings ago. And Kyle Warren, the Director of Finance and Operations, is going to provide that information tonight. Thank you, Kyle.
Yeah, absolutely. So like you described, following up on our previous conversations here, we did have a in-depth, in detail walkthrough of the backgrounds on the solar energy credits, as well as the debits and credits there. But following up with the full committee, I'll keep this abbreviated to hopefully about 5 minutes, and wanted to thank Paul Mayette too. I think a takeaway of the finance subcommittee discussion was to try and help pair that discussion with some visuals to further understand the concepts here. So in the first slide, going over the background on the agreement. So this solar credit agreement was first signed in 2011. It's a 20-year agreement where we have 2 arrays at the Rabbit Road Solar Farm right in Salisbury. We're responsible for purchasing 100% of the credits that those solar arrays generate. In a few slides, we'll get to the risks versus the benefits of that agreement. But the background basically is this agreement allowed us to achieve a 10% discount or 10% savings on the kilowatt per hour purchase price that we would typically see in the market environment. From an ideal setup standpoint, what we see is we purchase these solar credits directly from a company called Brookfield Renewable. We pay for those, and then those credits are then shifted over to our National Grid electric bills. There's some mechanic there about how the credits move through those bills themselves, but the idea behind it is we have our total energy usage in any given month. If you look at the bar chart on the left there, the blue is intended to depict our total energy usage in a given month, and then in green is what we purchase in advance through credits, and then the remainder of the payment for those and for that energy usage would be directly to National Grid at the market rate. So ideally, the green chart there is going to be, the green component of the bar graph is going to be as close to that total energy use as possible without going over. The next 2 slides here, jumping into, again, the risk versus the benefits of this agreement. Historically, what we've seen, although there's been some oscillation there, is that, like I described, if we want to look at our total energy usage and make sure that the number of credits we're purchasing is as close to that as possible without going over, to quote Bob Barker. So on the left, you see two different bar graphs there. In the light blue is the credits purchased, and then the dark blue is the kilowatts hours used. So you can see on the left, the light blue is lower than the kilowatts used. That's ideal. And on the right, if we get over there, is where it dips into the problematic phase. That's going to be when we are purchasing more credits than we are actually using. And this is going to flow into our discussion about the FY23 experience and the challenges that we face there, where when we're purchasing more credits than we're actually using energy, we don't lose those because it's essentially prepaying for that energy use, but it goes into a balance that's carried over from a month-to-month and annual basis, and that balance will grow, right? If we then get into a next month where we use more energy than we have credits, then the balance dips, so it oscillates. When we look at the annual totals over for FY23, let's see, did I lose chart here a little bit? So talking about our experience for FY23 and the challenges that we faced is when we look at all of our electric bills as a whole, we had a process in place where we have a reconciliation and make sure, okay, if on one account a balance is accumulating of credits, surplus credits, we can shift those over to an account where we might be owing money. That process fell through the cracks. As part of our our monthly budget to actual monitoring, we did pick up in about the February to March time frame that there was a problem because we were seeing our trend or our trajectory for that electricity line item, that it was going over budget. So that's when kind of put the brakes on everything. We stopped paying National Grid, we stopped paying Brookfield Renewable, so we could really get a hold of the process and see what was going on. We were, as a result of taking over that process, we were able to alleviate some of the over expenditures that occurred, but we weren't able to fix all of it. So what ultimately happened for FY23 is that our accumulating balance of credits available to us, we had a surplus of credits of 200, actually get the exact number here. At the beginning of the year, 262,000 of credits that were available at the beginning of the year. That credit surplus grew to $650,000 at the end of the year. There's two components to why that growth occurred. If we break it down to what's controllable and what's not controllable, because that's important to Paul Lee's question a few meetings ago is, okay, what's the impact going to be on FY24 and going forward so that we can fully understand this. The uncontrollable element to it is the $110,000 that we have detailed in the slide here. That's going to be for FY23. We purchased $110,000 more of credits than we actually used for energy. So that was uncontrollable. There was nothing we could have done. We were contractually obligated. What was controllable was the $267,000 of payments that were made directly to National Grid that we did not need to make. These payments occurred because we had invoices from National Grid that said you had these amounts due as part of that reconciliation process that I had mentioned that had gone by the wayside. Is we had these amounts due, but then we also had credits available, so you just shift them around so that you don't actually make payments. So that $267,000 we did not need to pay, and that created a challenge for closing our fiscal year, for sure. The one silver lining on this is that we don't lose those prepaid credits. They carry over from year to year. I'll get on to the next slide, how we see the outlook moving forward. But again, fully acknowledge the gravity of this, $267,000. The hardship on the budget was we had savings, luckily, from the buses not running, other areas that we were able to cover that $267,000. Unfortunately, there were other overages, things like special ed, that we would have loved to have covered with the general fund, but we had to dip into reserves to fill those gaps. Looking towards the future, so for the short-term pain, long-term gain, perhaps. Looking at FY24, because those solar arrays are firing on all cylinders right now, and we're required to purchase all of these credits, in FY24, it is looking like we'll probably overexpend our budget again for the electricity line item by perhaps about $100,000. It's a huge unknown, because on a month-to-month basis, the credits that these solar arrays generate vary wildly. In FY23, they varied from $30,000 a month to $120,000 a month. The $120,000 was an outlier, for sure, but right now in FY24, for July and August, we're averaging about $60,000 worth of credits that we're purchasing. So when we look to, if it stayed at $60,000 a month, we'd be over by about $100,000. That we'll have to fill that gap this year. We have those 2 bus runs that aren't being staffed right now, so we do have savings that we can use to offset that. And then looking towards FY25 and beyond, FY25, we have our electricity purchasing contract that is up for renewal. This is separate from the credits. So the credits is a 20-year agreement. Then actual electric rates is a 4-year agreement. It's being renewed in FY25, and rates are going up 35%. So that would be a challenge. Luckily, we have this balance, the credits that have accumulated, so we'll be able to offset those increases. So that'll ease the pain there. I think we'll be able to level fund the FY25 budget for electricity because we do have those available credits. And then the last item that we're looking into is asking the fellow finance directors, our auditors, about what options might be available to us, is that there are certain communities where they have an arrangement where if they have excess credits, they're able to sell those off to third parties. Every agreement's different, right? But we want to see if that's feasible for us as a stop loss or a pressure release valve, as Narissa likes to say, where if we get into a bit of a predicament there with a large balance, we can sell them off immediately. I don't know if I kept that to 5 minutes or not, but yes. Any questions there?
How long are we in this contract that we?
2031. So the challenge is going to be, I would say, this year is going to be the hardest year. With rates going up significantly in FY25, we'll be able to draw off that balance. Our electricity rates that we've been purchasing through National Grid have been not artificially low. They've been very beneficially low over the past few years. But as we get more in line with market trends, that'll even itself out. But it's the risk of the agreement, for sure.
So just to clarify, so he was nice to not say the guy to my left signed the agreement. So when we signed that back in 2011, we were paying National Grid for our electricity, and this was, we were going to buy these credits at a 10% discount, so pay 90 cents on the dollar from the solar array. We would then pay National Grid the same rate over here, and then get those credits, and it offsets, and so we, in essence, save 10 cents on every dollar. After that happened, we then were able to start contracting for electricity at a much lower rate. So we knew we would accrue some credits. There were some weird swings, as Narissa mentioned. We've been talking about this for years. This predates Kyle. So there's been a structural problem since pretty soon after we signed that 20-year PPA. So the difference now is where we started was here, rates that we're buying them at and rates that we're buying electricity at were offsetting, and we were saving that 10 cents of every dollar. We went way down, so the credits are building up. As Kyle mentioned, we relocked rates in starting in '25 with a 35% increase, so we're back to pretty much the market rates. So it's going to allow us to slowly ease those rates in. Like Kyle said, we can have a 0% increase next year or a $0 increase, and allows us to phase in that increase because I don't see those rates going back down again quickly. So once we're paying that higher rate, then we're actually back to where we were, and we're not in this situation where we're perpetually generating credits. So it's not that second bullet point there, right? We still, the $650,000 of roughly 647, those $650,000 where the credits cost us $585,000 over the last, since 2011, so what is that, over 12 years. So it's still a savings, so that's a good thing, but we would really like to be able to have that cash right now. So what was a very negative a year and a half ago when we locked these rates in knowing we were going to have to, now at least we have this funding available in credits to be able to offset that what would have been several $100,000, about $250,000 increase just in electricity next year for fiscal '25.
Does anybody have any questions for Kyle?
When will we know if there's places that will buy them?
Say that one more time, sorry?
Well, you were looking at organizations or companies like the same as you buy like carbon credits, you can buy these solar credits. When will we find that out? Is there someone actively looking at it now?
Two different elements. So we have a consultant that we work with through, it's Crest Collaborative, who we locked in that agreement. Going to be reaching out to him as a first step to see if he can navigate that for us. I'll have an update for you I'll have an update for Finance Subcommittee at the next meeting for sure. We'll have this as a standing item.
Just one point of context. Awesome if Kyle can figure this out. Michelle Cresta spent 2 years trying to undo this as well as I did prior to her. So again, we're going to do our due diligence to see if there's a way, but we are the purchaser of those credits. So this is Brian Forget talking. I don't think it's possible, but he's the guy. He's going to make it happen. He's going to try.
We'll try. We'll try. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The next item is the school committee newsletter. The request for a discussion on a school committee newsletter was brought by the Policy and Advocacy Subcommittee. So I'm going to turn this over to the chair of the subcommittee, Paul Goldman.
So Policy and Advocacy is conceived essentially of sending out a monthly newsletter to the full community, not just households that are attached to the schools, but all of the residents of Newbury, Rowley, and Salisbury. And the way that we're looking at this right now is using Parent Square, which is going to be the new communication device that the district is using. And we get those weekly digest newsletters once a month. The weekly digest would have a section that is from the school, news from the school committee. It would have student of the month, any legislative actions that we're looking at, ways that we're contacting this legislature, and potentially other we would probably update on, we received our MCAS results at our October meeting and things like that, high impact items for the community that are in our agenda, so that the communities know what we are doing as a committee in addition to what is happening in the schools. A lot of those weekly digests have theater events and major sporting events and activities within the school that are often open to the communities as well. So the idea is simply to increase communication and knowledge with the residents of our communities who are not directly attached to the schools. The challenge will be building out the contact database with Parent Square, because we would have to actively gather email contact information from the community. But this is what we're thinking of, and yeah, I'll open it up for questions.
Does anybody have any questions for Paul?
So when you say gathering the email contacts, so this would be something people would opt into?
Unless we can figure out a way to get it to be an opt-out, which I think that we have to have it be opt-in, and that might mean reaching out to, the select boards and asking them to reach out, or it might involve, mailers, or I don't know. Not sure yet, but Parent Square is not up and running even for Blackboard yet, so this is something that's probably happening during the winter months as a first go at it. So we'll be discussing this again at November and December policy and advocacy, so hopefully more information then on that particular piece.
Thank you, Paul. The next item is to review the MASC resolutions. Paul Mayette is the only member, along with Brian, attending the MASC conference this year, and he's going to be the resolution assembly delegate as well. The resolutions are attached. The discussion and amendments of the assembly are difficult to anticipate, so the delegate always has to use his judgment, but we do like to provide some feedback in advance on the topics. Does anyone want to address any of the resolutions and provide Paul any input? And when you go to these delegate meetings, there's a lot of people that go up there and disagree with what the resolution is, and they all make amendments, and then you have to vote on the amendments. So this meeting could take all day.
I have been through it on the state level for some other stuff. So.
Yeah. So, but there is some good conversation to come out of some of this stuff.
Having gone through them, I would ask, there's two that I get kind of questions about. One was the MSBA, because it does look at funding it more, but it also calls for moving it into preschool, so I don't know if there was a thought about whether that hurts or helps us. If anybody had thoughts there. And then the other one is the regional transportation piece, where it looked like it would allow students to opt out of the bus. Particularly Kyle, I don't know if that would land us in a hot mess down the line if they opted back in, or if that got too messy. Those are the two that really jumped out at me.
I want to let it marinate in my mind a little bit more. I'll get back to you. Thank you. Because I could, yeah.
I'd just say my take on the MSBA one is that if they raise the spending cap, then like it may help, it may hurt if they start including preschools, but like preschool's gotten really expensive, and anything that, and it makes for a really significant burden on people trying to find care, and that I think alleviating that stress at younger years does nothing but help us in the later years. I don't know if MSBA getting involved would have any real impact on the costs and availability, but
I would say on the regional agreement one. Sorry. On the regional agreement number 3, so regional transportation. Sorry, I said regional agreement. I think that is, they're looking to allow families to opt out if the Commonwealth reimbursement does not fully cover the amounts expended for such transportation. So then they can charge a fee or opt out, and the fee can't exceed the differential between the amounts expended and for furnishing, right, I mean, way complicated. I think the idea, I know we talked about it on that State Transportation Commission I did several years back, is just make it simple. Let families opt out, and if they opt out, make it twice a year, right? September 1st and January 1st, you have the ability to opt out, and we're not going to route a bus for you, and that allows us to be a little more efficient, because even though we know they're not running full with 77s, we have to route the buses, assuming we have to pick up every student, and then we tweak as the year goes on. So I think there are a lot of efficiencies. I think this is very complicated. This makes it very messy. Good thinking, bad execution. On the bidding procedures, I would say yes, anything and everything possible to dig into that. I know there's already, was it the State Auditor's Office? It was, yeah. I know Auditor DeZoglia was already digging into this. Kyle's been contacted. I was actually contacted by, who was I contacted by? The Attorney General? They were talking, there was another potential lawsuit brewing. So that's absolutely not a bad one. And I think on the MSBI, I would have to read that in more detail to fully understand it. Yeah. So the cap was increased to 1.2, right, in the fiscal '24 budget. The cap was increased. Removing the, oh, they want to just remove the cap. Sure. Yeah, that's, I think removing the cap is nothing but positive. Yes, we like the accelerated repair program. Yeah, we like that one.
You get all what you need, Paul?
I think I do.
Brian will be with you, so he can,
I will not. I will be at the conference. I will not be at the
no,
delegate meeting.
meaning you can discuss the one that you have to review.
Yes. Deep conversations, Paul. 2 days worth.
Okay, the next item is the the superintendent's report. Superintendent Brian Forget is going to review his report.
I will keep this brief, given the hour. First item there, just giving you an update on the enrollments and the participation for fourth grade students who are participating in the instrumental program now that it is free. So we have the key numbers went from 27 at Newbury to 37, 26 at Pine Grove to 39, and 8 at Salisbury to 24. You can see off to the right as a participation rate and the total number of students, obviously because the class sizes change as well. The increase in participation in grade 4 at Salisbury is actually 300% increase, but it's a 21% increase in the actual participation rate. So that's a significant increase in the total number of students. It's 14% overall at Newbury, 9% at Pine Grove, and 21% at Salisbury. So again, proof is in the pudding, and whether these students stick with it, fully commit and continue in playing in 5th and 6th grade and beyond. But that is certainly a good start, and hopefully you saw the article in the Daily News that was written by a woman, Lisa, who I hope becomes our new reporter, because she is wonderful to work with and writes a great story. Shocker, she used to be a teacher. Quick transportation update, just kind of a standing item here. Yes, we have little hiccups here and there. Overall, it still has been a much better year, but we are starting to see call-outs and some delays and some combinations. So I don't know if there's anything specific you want to say.
I just wanted to mention too with the app, that had been delayed, but I am reasonably optimistic that by the end of this month, we'll have that out to families. Reasonably optimistic.
Quote them. Update on mold. You know, we talked about issues at Newbury, Salisbury, in the middle school. All the issues have been resolved except for, it was a major issue in the Newbury Elementary Auditorium that's working with the town, $80,000+ repair, major leaks in the ceiling and the roof. That one is still underway. The auditorium is closed for several weeks now. That work has just gone underway. Middle school repairs are done, leaks are fixed relatively. Those rooms all tested clean. All of the spaces at Salisbury, except for one classroom, are 138, and then at Newbury, classroom 207. So these rooms, 1 and 207 at Newbury, we know the cause. That is in the process of being repaired, fixed, cleaned, will be retested. Room 138 at Salisbury, it's a mystery. So we're going to be spending more time talking about when we test for mold. You remember we had someone complain to the Department of Public Health last year for this campus, and it was a 4-day visit, I believe. They said you shouldn't be doing mold testing, right? We know the mold levels are higher outside than they are inside. So if someone's going to react outside, or if they're going to react inside, they'll react more outside. So obviously, if you see mold, we should be remediating and testing. But obviously, there was a little bit of a contagion effect, and folks started to talk about, well, I need my room tested. So we're kind of working through that. But so there are those still two rooms. I don't know, are you reaching? You didn't have an update?
Oh, I was just going to share another element why these mold testing processes are challenging is because they're so sensitive that if somebody walks in the room and walks out and they had mold on their clothing and it fell off, that test would pick up on it. Yeah. So it's transient particles as well. So the person who came in was...
Kyle's got an education in mold.
Gave us a full rundown, and it was fascinating, and they are performing their due diligence on these spaces, but then in practical application, it creates this challenge, right, where we have outside mold particles, and then Salisbury Elementary is the perfect example. We cannot find the source of that.
But still, it's a trace amount. So it's not like there's these crazy high levels. So since we tested, we're going to follow it through and figure it out and clean it, or make sure we have a clean test entirely. So, so again, it's 2 tests, 2 rooms, 207 at Newbury and 138 at Salisbury that are still being impacted. We believe we have a remedy for Newbury. Could be back online as soon as next week. No questions. Parent Square update, just give you a quick update. We're hoping that by early next month, we will, fairly confident that by early next month, we will have the school newsletters, the weekly newsletters going out through Parent Square. Obviously, it's more than just an email, so there'll be parent education coming out about how to download the app and how the information can be delivered, much more user-controlled. So we are still on track, and as Paul was talking about, looking to put out a more broad school committee communication as well. And the Parent Square does have the feature that allows us to sign up individuals that are not part of our student information system, which is what Blackboard does. So we can't add other people because it's connected to our student information, and obviously that's secure for safety reasons. So we're still figuring out exactly how that will work, whether there's a button on the website that says sign up here for the newsletter or what have you, but working through that, looking to that information will start being shared out by early next month. Pine Grove, there is a composting trial that is taking place. TEF has funded the barrels, the liners, and the pickup through Black Earth. lots of talk around, could we get compostable trays and compostable silverware, or move to real silverware? This is a very, it can be a personnel-heavy venture because the compost cannot be contaminated. So if you're composting, obviously, food waste, and someone throws something in there, it ruins the entire batch of compost that can't be dumped into the main barrel. So it'll actually be parent volunteers who are monitoring that at Pine Grove. And as I said, TEF is paying for the barrels, the biodegradable liners, and the pickup service through Black Earth. So if it is something that's both affordable and sustainable from a personnel standpoint, it's certainly something we would be looking to implement in other cafeterias if it's as simple as just one more barrel to empty, whether we're emptying trash or compost. So that remains to be seen. But I believe tomorrow, Nicole and Elise are doing their, it might be today, might have been today, that they were doing their big unveiling during lunches at Pine Grove. And the last thing here, I included the timeline for the SES principal search, so I'll be meeting with the faculty and staff actually tomorrow afternoon. I have talked to Erica Champagne, who is the school council co-chair. So there'll be a full 3-panel process on the third week of January. It will include an administrator panel, a faculty staff panel that's organized by the association, and then a parent and guardian panel that is coordinated by Erica as the school council co-chair. We will have that, we'll go through the process. There'll be a survey that's going to go out to families and staff next week about what are the priorities, what are the qualities we're looking for in the next principal. Do a lot of aggregating, bring that group together right after the new year, and then interviews. First round, you can see in the schedule on Appendix 1. First round of interviews would be the week of January 29th. Second round will be the week of the 5th of February. Confirm a finalist by February 9th. Obviously, we have a week and then February break in there. Finalist visits to the school Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, the 26th, 7th, and 8th of February. And then the following week, do the follow-up to make a final, that I would make a final decision and then announce on March 8th, and hopefully have that person here with you on March 13th, which is exactly 5 months from tonight, right? As the new principal at Salisbury. The principal would then be part of the process to determine the assistant principal for the school as well. So both Catherine and Jane took interim positions for these 3 years at Salisbury. So both positions will be determined, principal first, and then determine, with that principal, determine the right assistant principal for Salisbury moving forward to continue the work. I think that was all on that I was going to say. And then the personnel report is there. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Does anybody have any questions for Brian?
Can I say one more thing, because it's on the report now too? So on the personal report, Joanne Levesque, long time staple at Salisbury, is retiring at the end of this year. So that will also be part of the process, that the new principal would be involved in finding her replacement as the person who would be there long term.
More changes for Salisbury. I said more changes for Salisbury.
Now I'll put
Sounds
my
good.
microphone back on.
I move that we receive and file the October superintendent's report as presented.
Second.
Any discussion? Roll call vote. Paulise?
Yes.
Susanna?
Yes.
Caitlin?
Yes.
Paul Goldner?
Yes.
Paul Mayette?
Yes.
Matt?
Yes.
Still there.
Narissa?
Yes.
I'm a yes as well. The next item is the subcommittee reports. Paul Goldner, Policy and Advocacy. Oh,
I'm thinking I don't have any, actually. I take the year off.
I am so sorry. Superintendent's goals. The superintendent's annual goals are also on the agenda tonight. This document serves as part of the basis for his review at the end of the school year, and the superintendent will now take us through his goals.
So I will attempt to also keep this brief. Happy to answer questions. You have the document. Anyone who's watching from home, our large audience also has this document on board docs. But to briefly go through them, obviously I have 3 goals by design that is required for administrators, for superintendents: a student learning goal, a professional practice goal, and a district improvement goal. So for my student practice goal, I believe this is what you were referring to earlier, Linda, I want to, right, Anna and I talked about this. It's hard for me to have a goal about student performance, but it's also hard for me not to have a goal about student performance, right? I don't have any direct contact on a daily basis with those who are impacting student growth and development. However, I think it's important in this goal, through iReady data, focusing on stretch growth. So again, stretch growth is the growth that's above typical expected growth, and stretch growth is needed for students to close the gap to get to where they need to be on grade level or above. So, as we look at all of our goals and taking an equity lens and the students who need our support the most, I felt this was an important goal that overall, just in summary, that it would be increasing the total number of students achieving stretch growth at the district level, and then for each school. Again, there's no high school component to this. That doesn't mean we're not focusing on the high school as well. But for me, we have this iReady data. It was Susanna talking about the value of iReady data and how instant it is and how we can respond to it. So the goal here is increasing everyone's district-wide, and then the 3 elementaries and the middle school growth, both the reading and the math, increasing the overall stretch growth in each of those schools or overall by 10%. And then the second component of that is, I would say, actually completing the thing I said I was going to do last year, which was an assessment of our visual and performing arts program overall. There was a lot of work done last year, but it wasn't brought back to you to say, here's what we need. There was a proposal in the budget that obviously we couldn't fund, but this year we'll be doing surveying of parents and getting feedback and students to fully understand what is feeding to the lower numbers and the declining enrollment in the visual and performing arts. So again, I won't read through them, but obviously the outcomes and the evidence that you will see. I'll keep going. I don't see anyone looking at me ready for a question. I'll take questions at the end. Does that make sense? Professional practice goal, the 3 actions. It's overall about communication. So obviously the full implementation of Parent Square. We are actually next week, we have a team that is participating in a Vision of the Graduate workshop through NEASC. Obviously, we always think of NEASC as a high school thing, and we think about the Vision of the Graduate as a high school thing. So we're taking a team, elementary, middle, high school, Anna and I. We can take 6, we couldn't take everyone. And we meet 2 days next week, and then there's some work over at the conference that we'll go down and meet with them for, and then meeting again in April and working through the phases to begin this work, rolling it out. Obviously, we've talked about the fact that there is a vision that the high school has developed through the NEASC accreditation process, but this is important that we do this as a district, that the work that we're doing at Salisbury or Newbury or Pine Grove is leading to what we believe, what we want in a student as they walk across the stage at roughly age 18. So excited about that work this year. And then I am going to launch a YouTube video series, a name to be determined. So I came up with a name, and apparently it was not cool at all. I thought it was wicked cool. I'm not going to share it now. Doesn't matter. It would be memed, apparently. It would be taken out of context, apparently. So the idea is that on a weekly basis, I'm going to go around, and I am just going to say hello and just do a quick 60, 90-second video so that every Friday it posts, and highlighting the good things, right? Part of this, I've told you I'm on that Leading Now cohort, and some of the examples that people are doing is inspiring because, right, if we don't fill the airwaves with good news, people will fill it in. And so there are things that we need to talk about that we need to do better, absolutely, but there are also amazing things happening. And so it will be a weekly quick video that we'll post every Friday. Again, don't know the exact time, but it'll be scheduled on the YouTube channel to post. And it's something that I'm going to do right on my iPhone, not any kind of detailed, involved video. But I think it's important to start on a weekly basis celebrating the good things happening. And then the district improvement goal. Both of these focus on overall, the goal is to work towards Triton being a place where all students, staff, and families feel a sense of belonging. I won't read the whole thing. And these two actions are working with overall the equity statement that we developed and refining that, involving people in that process to determine is that correct? Is that the right wording? Are there words missing? How can we rephrase so that is reflective of what we desire to be? And the second piece is working with each school to make sure that this work is embedded in the work that they're doing. And as I'm talking with the principals and their goals and the structures that they have, this isn't being, it's been iterations of how we do the DEIB work, how we do it. And it can't be a standalone thing. I think what I did wrong early on was trying to do that as a standalone effort, and it's not. It's embedded in everything we do every day and every word we say. So it's embedding this work into the data teams and the weekly meetings and the routine meetings that are happening on a day-to-day basis. So that will be the second part of that goal. So are there any questions about my goals?
Does anybody have any questions?
No, go ahead. So Brian, I think on the first goal, you said something to the effect of, I don't have direct contact with the people responsible for teaching and learning, and I think you need to coordinate so that goal 1 and goal 2 come together. So when you're doing the YouTube, you are in the classroom and you are reaching out to those people. And I think that's something you should consider. I also want to comment that Nicole is not the bellwether of whether or not the name of that program is good or not, because she's over there breaking her neck, snapping her head back and forth.
It was a lot of people.
Clear that she's not it.
I don't want it to become a meme. I want it to be cool. So yes. So, and I will say too. So maybe that wasn't the right choice of words. I'm in schools. I'm in schools more this year than I have been in years, and it's awesome. But I don't have direct day-to-day. Right. That's not where I'm spending the majority of my time. But point well taken.
Couple of things. One, and sort of tying together your superintendent's report in this, I love the increase in the fourth graders engaged in band. Those are two-thirds of the students at 2 of the schools, and then that huge jump at Salisbury. I think we talk about what can we do for Salisbury. We can get them doing extracurricular activities like band that meaningful and make a joyful connection to the school and expand there. And so then seeing that as your goal is also good to see. I think expanding the arts is nice. The other comment I had was the vision of the graduate. One, I'm glad to see that's pre-K through 12, because when I was doing this work 5 years ago, other places, I got yelled at for it only being a high school thing. But the other piece was that it is possible, like there's the 2 phases of the vision of the graduate. There's the picture that outwardly presents, and there's the piece that's inwardly actionable. And I don't lose the inwardly actionable piece because too many stakeholders get involved.
Well said.
Does anybody else have anything else? I just want to say that I appreciate goal number 1 because, again, it's getting you involved with and meeting your goal of how passionate you should be about making sure that our students are meeting those stretch growth. And I just want to say that I said it when the principals were here, that the MCAS is one data point and the growth in the iReady and all that. However, our community doesn't see the iReady scores and all that. Everything is based on that MCAS score. So unfortunately, I don't know if there's a way to get iReady scores out there as we move the parent, what is that called? Parent Square. That possibly getting that out there, I think, would be a huge asset so that everybody's not focusing on that MCAS score all the time. And to truly get people to understand what MCAS, that it is only one data point. So I appreciate this goal for that reason. And hopefully, doing what we did with the fourth grade will increase student participation in the arts. That will be telling whether that is helpful, because there's so many other things that students are involved with. So, anybody have anything else?
Make a motion to approve the superintendent's goals for the 2023-2024 school year as presented.
Second?
Any discussion? We need a roll call vote. Paulise?
Yes.
Susanna?
Yes.
Caitlin?
Yes.
Paul Goldner?
Yes.
Paul Mayette?
Yes.
Matthew?
Yes.
Narissa?
Yes.
Glad you're still with us.
I said yes.
And I'm a yes as well. Okay, moving on to the subcommittee reports. Paul Goldner.
Policy and advocacy met today. We reviewed policy manual section A, as well as 3 policies from section D. Section D is related to mostly changes in the law that we are adapting to. But at any rate, we're made a goal of reviewing every policy that we have on a regular basis, and this is part of that process. So doing that work, also talking about the newsletter, meeting again in a few weeks, and doing that same work.
Thank you, Paul. Finance? Suzanne? Oh, that's Paul Mayette. I'm sorry. I am just not with it today.
We met on the 28th. A good chunk of that time was dedicated to the solar discussion that we saw tonight, but important updates, all 3 towns are up to date in payments, so that's always good. Correct me if I'm wrong, you did say that the Kids Club is currently not losing money, and we're going to look forward to, as the October enrollment numbers come in, starting to see where we stand with school choice and all that.
Personnel negotiations. Susanna?
We don't have any meetings scheduled just yet. I think we're waiting for some background information around cafeteria workers negotiations that would start this year. So we're still awaiting that information from Kyle and Brian to bring together, and then we'll meet.
We have a first meeting with them on Monday,
Yay,
this coming Monday.
progress. So,
Thank you. And next item is the adjournment. Once again, I want to thank all of you for all the work that you do. It takes a village. Can I have a motion to adjourn?
Make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Any discussion? Roll call vote. Paulise?
Yes.
Susanna?
yes.
Caitlin?
Yes.
Paul Goldner?
Yes.
Paul Mayette?
Yes.
Matthew?
Yes.
Narissa?
Yes.
Okay, have a nice evening.